Welcome back, GCR listeners, to the latest installment of the 13 Tips to Heal Your Thyroid. We're more than halfway through. So if you're wondering when on God's green earth is this series going to be over, well, when we get to the number 13 is when it'll be over. And this is tip number 8. And so far, we've gone over so many valuable concepts from testing, nutritional, exercise, stress mitigation, resiliency, all these things. Now we get to dive into a little bit more nuance and a little bit more nitty-gritty to hopefully help you understand that your thyroid symptoms, the symptoms that you've attributed to thyroid, that doctors have told you, oh, your thyroid's broken or it needs to be fixed, all these sort of hyperbolic words. What stress, as we talked about, it's about the sources of stress. What sources of stress can lead to those words of fixed and broken, which aren't actually true, needing to be coming out?
Welcome to Gut Check Radio, the holistic health podcast where we explore the uniqueness of the human experience to help you navigate your health journey. I'm Nick Belden, a chiropractic physician and functional medicine practitioner, and you all know what's coming next, but the information provided in this podcast is for educational entertainment purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, cure, or treat any disease, and do not apply any of the information here without first speaking with your physician.
So tip 8 is we need to achieve stable blood sugar. Odds are, if you're listening to this video, you're very familiar with the idea of blood sugar and you're very familiar with the habits and behaviors that you need in order to maintain a sort of stable blood sugar, right? But I think it's still important sometimes to go over just the basics. And I have two pictures here for those of you watching on YouTube. Thank you. For those of you listening via podcast, I'll describe these a little bit in detail. So in the bottom right corner, I have a picture of a roller coaster. And quite an extreme one. It looks like it goes completely up and then completely spins you back down. It looks like you almost go upside down a little bit or completely upside down before you spin back down. It's a very variable roller coaster. And that means it goes really high, really low, lots of turns, lots of spins. Your classic one where if you love thrill-seeking behavior, you're going to love this roller coaster. Then if you're someone like myself who previously has not been a fan of roller coasters, looking at this picture elicits particular emotions, which we'll get to that in a second. So you have that image. And then you have an image on the top right of a railroad track. It's just as if you were looking directly down the wooden pines of a railroad track. It's very stable. It's very flat. There might be some elevations randomly as it go over different mountainous terrains or in different terrains of the country. But for the most part, you like to have train tracks be pretty well flat. And I liken blood sugar to that as well. If you have a blood sugar that looks like the roller coaster, you're probably going to have a myriad of symptoms that we'll talk about in a second. But the goal in achieving stable blood sugar is really to get you off the roller coaster and back onto the train tracks. Like I said, the movement of continuous glucose monitors, which I've talked about on previous podcasts with my buddy, Dr. Grady, who's a type 1 diabetic, and also my buddy, Dr. Garrett, also type 1 diabetic, and both are very well versed in CGMs, and which are continuous glucose monitors, things that you can monitor your blood glucose in real time to your habits and behaviors. So if you're curious about that, you can listen to those episodes. But so you have all these new wearables and all these new technological innovations that allow us to have deeper insights into our blood sugar. And ultimately, what a lot of these people are looking for is, are there any roller coasters? Are there any foods? Are there any eating environments? Are there any particular lifestyle behaviors or habits that lead to the roller coaster, and then vice versa? Are there any things that lead to the railroad tracks? And it's generally the railroad tracks. That's what we're going for. But there's always variations. It's never completely stable. Even the most healthy person on earth will have some sort of spike from a meal. That's completely normal. I would even call that should happen. But the goal is always to keep as most on the train tracks as possible and to minimize this large rise and then large fall you see here on the roller coaster here. And a big telltale sign that your blood sugar may need some support is if your energy levels, your levels of mental focus, your levels of mental clarity, of physical energy, if they all feel like they're on a roller coaster, that's because your blood sugar might actually be on a roller coaster. It might be having those incredible ups to then those incredible downs. We don't need to get into the physiologic things of the pancreas and insulin secretion and things. There are a myriad of podcasts that have gone over that. But if you feel like your energy levels feel like you're on a roller coaster with that many ups and downs, that much variability, your blood sugar might need some love. What are some other signs of blood sugar stress? And these ones are some of the more common ones I see. And I'll start with sort of the least sort of worrisome, and we'll sort of progress into more things you might want to be, hey, you might actually want to check out a provider. Things like cravings are often probably one of the number one symptoms associated with blood sugar stress. As the roller coaster starts to come down, your body sorts of kicks in these hormonal mechanisms to bring your blood sugar back to the railroad tracks. Again, we're always trying to go from the roller coaster to the tracks, to the railroad tracks. As it starts to bring it back to the railroad tracks, it starts to eat food. So you start to get cravings for sugar, fat, even protein or sugar after meals. Or if you feel that your energy levels change with meals. So I hear this all the time in practice, is that eating either makes people tired, like they feel really good, then they eat a meal and then they tired. So those people end up actually eating less, or they end up excessively fasting, which can create added stress on the blood sugar regulatory mechanisms. Or people that feel really tired and then need to eat to gain energy. So if you're in one of those two camps, right? If you either eat a meal and you get tired, or you are tired and the meal gives you energy, and you feel like, again, it's a roller coaster type vibe that happens around meals, that could be a sign that your blood sugar is under stress. Again, that's nothing to fault you, your habits and behaviors. That's just a sign that the body's output is giving you and say, hey, maybe I need to change a different input. Maybe I need to change my view of the situation. Maybe I need to change the view of my environment to ultimately get that output of those stable train tracks. And then hangry. We've all seen the, Snickers, you're not you and your hungry commercials, right? They're so funny and they're always doing weird things, or they're always like a grizzly bear, then they're a human. But just the quintessential phrase of hangry. And what's the worst thing you can tell someone who's hangry? Hey, I think you're hangry. having told my wife that enough times, like, hey, I think you need to eat. And then I get that look. I'm sure we all know that look, right? Where you're like, oh, shouldn't have said that. I've learned through trial and error enough to not say that every time. But that in and of itself can be a sign, if you feel hangry, that maybe there's some underlying blood sugar stress going on. And if you get the jitteriness, shakiness, or I said shakes twice, sorry, jitteriness, tremors, or shakes, that also could be a sign of blood sugar stress. A very common one I see with people, this even, I experience this from time to time, is if I drink too much caffeine, or if I get too excited, sometimes it ramps up our nervous system, and the nervous system associated with stress and alert and response. And what that does is that kicks up a blood sugar response. So then you get shaky and you get jittery, as your blood vessels have a hard time perfusing the muscles in your fingers. So then they can't be as tactile. You even see them baseline a little bit shaky right now, for those of you watching on YouTube. Again, I see this most often when people either drink coffee or they do a lot of fasting. They tend to be more jittery, shaky, like they're always like fidgeting with their hands and things. They always need to be moving, because when it's hard for them to be still. So that in and of itself could be a sign of blood sugar stress. And then these last three here are more things as you get more progressive stages of blood sugar stress. So the first, I'd say 4 of cravings, energy levels that change with meals, hangry, jittery, shakiness. Those are more common. I would say these bottom 3 are by the time things get a little more progressive blood sugar. So if you're getting where you're urinating a lot more frequently than you're used to, or waking up more often than usual throughout the night, or if you're having increased thirst and appetite out of nowhere, sometimes that increased thirst can then lead to the frequent urination. And again, if that comes on very rapidly, seemingly out of nowhere, might want to go see somebody. Or if you get blurred vision, particularly after meals, that can be a strong indication that the roller coaster effect has become quite intense, and that there needs to be some short-term measures to help you bring down that sort of blood sugar stress response. All right, most important part of this video, okay? If you take away nothing else, take away this right here, right now. When it comes to blood sugar, many of you have probably heard, and I've even talked about it in this series, about the importance of protein intake, fiber, eating diverse amounts of colors and foods and fruits and vegetables in order to stabilize blood sugar. But when it comes to blood sugar, it is my belief that we overemphasize the quality, quote unquote quality, I'll talk about why I put that in quotes in a second, of the food we eat. And we underestimate the quality of our eating environment. What do I mean by this? I'm going to tell you guys a story. When I was in graduate school, I was under incredible amounts of stress. Self-imposed, right? I chose to go through graduate school and to put yourself through all those courses, to maintain a social life, to try and earn a little bit of money, to be able to provide for that social life while you're in graduate school. A lot of things going on, lots of stressors, lots of perceived stressors, like we talked about in the previous tip video. And I was eating about as clean ingredient food, quote unquote clean, as I thought, right? I would come home, all day from studying. I would study some more, but I'd be eating dinner on my bed, trying to be alert and focused while I'm trying to study, blood sugar physiology, while eating ground beef, sweet potato, avocado, berries, fermented foods, eggs, all these clean, nutrient dense foods. But I would feel miserable afterward. And I would feel lethargic and sort of, I was more like drops in energy with eating, which is I even at one time reverted to the OMAD, or the one meal a day, because I found anytime I ate, I would get a drop in mental performance. So I wouldn't eat until the very end of the day, which if you do that long enough can create its own type of blood sugar stress. So I'm getting to this point and I'm eating the most clean ingredient meal ever. And I'm like, how, and grass-fed, grass-finished, organic, everything. And I'm like, how do I feel so terrible after eating this? And I remember throughout the same season, there was a break in school and I went home and ate probably some baked goods or some highly palatable, high sugar, high fat foods, but I was eating it around the table with my mom and stepdad and my brother. And I remember I felt fine. I felt completely fine. I felt no change in energy, no change in mental clarity, no changes in vision, no changes in how I felt. And I remember I thought on that night as I lay in bed. I hope my best thoughts come to me as I lay in bed. And I'm sitting there thinking, something's not right here. How is it that I eat a meal that's quote unquote unhealthy and feel completely fine afterward, but that I eat a meal that all the experts would say is pretty healthy? I mean, even the vegan carnivore experts would say for the most part I had some good stuff in there. They might disagree about some of it. And I feel like absolute garbage afterward. What is going on there? And it led me to, glory be to God, it led me to thinking, oh my goodness, my eating environment. When I was eating the meal on my bed, studying for exams, amongst all that stress, my brain was trying to be in a state of alertness with my studying. It was trying to be in a state of sleep while on my bed, which that's one tip I tell people, is that maybe don't study and sleep in the same spot because your brain is hard to differentiate the two. And I'm also trying to eat this big meal. And I have all these things working into the system. I'm not focused on my meal at all. I'm focused on the study material in front of me. And because my brain wasn't directly conscious of the food, I wasn't mindful, it didn't matter how clean of a meal it was. My nervous system, my system itself, my brain was not in a state to digest that meal because my eating environment needed to be more quality than the emphasis I put on my food quality. Brings me to another point. We need to stop assigning morality to food. To me, I've come full circle on this. I used to tell people, eat this, don't eat that. Very often it didn't work. And I never realized why. Is because there is evil in this world. There is. I mean, depending on your belief system, there is evil in this world. But it's not in food. Even God said, and it was good in Genesis. It's all good. Even Jesus says, I believe it's Luke, that it's not what comes in your body that defiles you. It is what comes out of your body that defiles you. And he was saying that all foods are clean. So all food is good. All food is. So to say there are good and bad foods, I don't necessarily think is the case. I mean, some people would put like an avocado and blueberries next to a piece of cake and a cookie and say that's bad and that's good. And I get where they're coming from. Is there more nutrient density in the blueberries and avocado? Yes. But we need more context around the food. Where's the eating environment? Are you eating at a birthday party? Are you eating in a stressed out state from work? Are you eating with family members on Thanksgiving, surrounded by people you love and care about? Moral of the story, we really need to put more emphasis into the quality of your eating environment rather than just, is it grass-fed, grass-finished, organic? And this picture here sort of illustrates the story I just said. So you have the person on the right here who looks very distraught, very stressed, but if you see the meal in front of them, it's a salad with spinach. Looks like the most clean ingredient meal on the planet. But look at their state. For those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see it, but those of you listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, this woman looks so frustrated, so sad, so distraught. And what that's doing is that's putting her nervous system not into a state of rest and digest. It's in the name, digest, but it's putting her nervous system into a state of what I've so eloquently heard from my DNRS training, CAN chemistry. Cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, the stress hormones. And the stress hormones are directly antagonistic to digestive function and to blood sugar stabilization. They actually kick off your liver to output more glucose and put it into your blood. So it's almost like this canned chemistry, which was designed by our creator. And then, if you also have put evolution there as well, to be able to respond to threat, to stress. But this woman here on the right is distraught from, we only know what. Her physiology thinks it's a lion. It could easily be the email she got from her boss. And it puts her blood sugar on a roller coaster by being in that canned chemistry. Again, I have to credit DNRS and Annie Hopper for that. Great work. If you're struggling with chronic conditions, chronic symptoms, I highly recommend you check that out. And then we shift to the left here. And you see this gentleman here, this older gentleman, we've got a piece of pumpkin pie in front of him. You could sort of insinuate maybe he's at a Thanksgiving dinner table. Look at, maybe that's his wife next to him smiling, his grandkids, maybe his daughter, all smiling, having a great time, engaged with one another, smiling, making eye contact, right? Like using their hands to talk with one another, engaging their rest and digest, social engagement part of their nervous system. And what we know about that end of the nervous system is that turns on hormones that are called dose chemistry. And so the DNRS has the phrase of give yourself a daily dose. And what is dose? Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. All the quote unquote feel good hormones and neurotransmitters and neurochemicals that our body uses. And when we're in more of that state of the rest and digest social engagement system, our blood sugar can stay more consistent. We can have better insulin secretion from the pancreas. We can have all these things associated with a more favorable train tracks like blood sugar response. Even though he's eating pumpkin pie and she's eating spinach, avocado, and chicken, the gentleman eating the pumpkin pie is probably going to have a better glycemic response and a better blood sugar response than the person eating their Whole30 paleo approved meal by themselves in a stress state. So something I've started recommending to my patients is pretend every meal is like Thanksgiving dinner. And I don't mean stuff your face and eat until you can't breathe anymore, but I mean eat in a very elevated emotional state, mindful, peaceful, safe, engaged with others type environment as you would for most of us on Thanksgiving dinner. Now, I realize also by saying that some of us out here might be alone on Thanksgiving, and I completely empathize with you on that. And also, if that is your situation, I'll give you some strategies as well that you can use to sort of try and mimic that state and the sort of the fake it until you make it phrase to get your nervous system into that rest and digest social engagement part of the nervous system. But again, pretend like every meal is Thanksgiving dinner, not from the sense of eating enough pumpkin pie and turkey and sweet potato casserole, which hot take, sweet potato casserole is by far the best dish on Thanksgiving. Not that, but more so eating with people, because it's my belief and my experience, both personally and clinically, that when people are eating mindfully with others, they're less likely to overeat. And that even if they do quote unquote overeat, because they're in such this rest and digest nervous system, their body will have an ability to handle that excess caloric intake. Again, that's my belief. So how do we activate this rest and digest or the social engagement part of our nervous system? Well, you can probably also or already start to insinuate by the phrase social engagement what things you can do. But again, if you're by yourself, taking part in pre-meal prayer is so impactful on every aspect of our well-being. And for those of you who that's not part of your practice, I understand, but I think I invite you to consider taking a moment prior to any meal to sort of put yourself into a state of being open to higher possibilities, being open to new states of mind. Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Such a powerful verse. It's been resonating with me recently. But taking part in pre-meal prayer directly activates that rest and digest portion of your nervous system. So if you're already doing that, and maybe you weren't even aware of this connection, claps, kudos to you, you're crushing it already. And as the name goes, social engagement system, take the opportunity to have a meal with a friend or a loved one. If you're eating at work and maybe having worked in the corporate environment, I know what happens. People all mostly sit by themselves at tables because we all feel like we need to reset by ourselves, which to me is a sign, if we're not willing to eat with others, that's a sign of a deeper spiritual struggle going on there that we need to explore. I know that's what it was like for me, and even for some of the people I work with who tend to eat by themselves, is there's a deeper internal spiritual struggle that is more than any vitamin D or probiotic could really ever help support. But find a friend, find a loved one, take any opportunity you can to eat with friends, I was a guy who, if my friends were going out to breakfast, but I was being really sort of tactile about my nutrition and I was only eating certain foods, I would go to restaurants and not eat. And I thought it was a cool one by like, I'm not eating pancakes and bacon and eggs and what is it, chicken and waffles, like they are. Da, da, da. I thought it was better than them because I wasn't eating and I was being this stoic, very, like I said, tactile nervous system that I needed to be hyper vigilant. So eat with a friend or loved one if you can. Relaxing music. So music has been shown time and time again to alter our bodies, not only state of the nervous system, but ultimately that hormonal response of that can versus that dose chemistry. Again, thanks to DNRS and Annie Hopper. My favorite app to use is something called Brain FM. That's actually exactly what I'm listening to right now. And it plays brain waves based on the mental state that you want to be in. So if you want to be in a more focused, deep work type state as I am right now, it'll play different brain frequencies. If you want to be in a relaxed eating environment, like you want to pretend like it's Thanksgiving dinner, you're winding down for sleep, you're just taking a break from work, they have relaxation music that sends different brain waves that are associated with that sort of meditative, mindful state. And that's a great tip for someone who's maybe still not at a place where they're ready to eat with others or they just prefer to eat by themselves. Listening to some sort of music can be very helpful. Now, if that means you're going to put in headphones and isolate yourself from other people, I would invite you to maybe take out the headphones, because if you want to convey to someone, hey, don't bother me, what's the number one way in our current culture to do that? Put it in headphones, especially when you have the big Beats ones. And typically, I'm not going to walk up to somebody who has those unless I really, really know them or really have something to say, because that's the international sign for don't talk to me. So maybe if you're by yourself but around others, maybe not have headphones in to be open to eating with others. But if you are by yourself, maybe in your home or what have you, that's a good time to put on relaxing music. Deep breaths. I mean, this is probably the advice that you guys have heard over and over and over again from people, is taking deep breaths prior to eating. And what that does really is it's by the physiological mechanism, by exhaling. So when you breathe in, it's an inhale, and then you exhale. When you exhale longer than you inhale, that activates the vagus nerve. It sends afferent neuronal input into the vagus nerve, which then will allow output and transition to that rest and digest social engagement system. So if you take 3 deep breaths before a meal of, again, as long as you exhale longer than you inhale, you will activate that vagus nerve. That's another great one to do if you're by yourself and you're not with people. And here's another environment here. If you're going to be in an environment where you're for sure going to be eating alone, I've been playing around with this and it has been so helpful for me. When I do, sometimes I'll eat lunch here at our office here by myself, is before eating, I'll take 1 to 2 minutes and visualize a time when I ate a meal with people I love. So whether it was my wife and I at our wedding recently, that was probably the best time, eating with all of your closest relatives, taking 1 to 2 minutes to close my eyes and really visualizing myself in this situation. And you need to almost give it as full an experience as possible to shift your nervous system into that rest and digest, and to activate that dose, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphin chemistry to shift the actual blood sugar response. And what I mean by that is you have to be very experiential. So talk about the people that were there, talk about what the weather was like, talk about what you smelled, talk about what you heard, talk about what you tasted, talk about what you felt with your hands. You need to be experiential, using all of your senses to really put your brain into that state. Because your brain, almost, you can trick it into thinking you're in that environment by visualizing. Especially the more senses you use, the more you're going to light up different brain regions associated with being there. Which, what I found, now that I do that, it actually makes me experience subsequent moments more, because I'm being very specific about what things I felt, smelt, tasted and heard at different environments in the past. Then I can go into the future and future environments and experience them fully, and then they can become that same level of positive memories. So that's a great one. Again, it doesn't have to be an exhaustive checklist. I'd pick 1 or 2 here that you feel like you're most likely to be consistent with. If prayer is not your thing, like, okay, maybe go to breath work. If you can't eat with a loved one, maybe visualize yourself. If you think the breath work stuff is too sort of trying to alter your conscious mind, then find someone to eat with. Find the thing that allows you to activate that rest and digest social engagement part of your nervous system. Food quality still matters to a degree. There's still wisdom in knowing that protein, fiber, various colors, various types of amino acids, various timing of your meals, the portion, all of that still matters. But from my view, in our current culture, we put too much emphasis on the food itself and not on the vesicle in which the food goes in. And so one person There's a brilliant study from 2016, and there's a TED Talk on it that talks about people's microbiome and how it differs their blood sugar response. So two people can have the same cookie, and one person's going to have a total roller coaster spike, and someone's going to have train tracks. And these authors theorized it was the microbiome. Fair, but we also know that the microbiome can shift based on your mental environment. So what we don't know about these people is what was the mental state like of the person whose blood sugar was a roller coaster, the cookie. They were probably eating that stressed after they got home from work, just trying to veg, versus the person who had the cookie and had a train tracks blood sugar response, was probably eating it with loved ones, with people they engaged with, probably did some prayer, probably did some breath work beforehand, and was eating it very mindfully.
Subscribe if you care to see me ramble any more than you already did today. And for more free content and guides, you can check out my clinic website at www.hivenaturalhealth.free-resources. And until next time, my friends, trust in your gut.